Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, listeners. It is House Talk pregame, family. It's Saturday, and oh my goodness, what an interesting Saturday it is proving to be. I'm your empowerment coach and inspirational speaker, Dr. Lauren Pitts. As always, I am extremely excited to have two of my three co-hosts with me for pregame. Former scholar athletes Jared Johnston from Bowie State and Ronnie Ransome from Virginia State. And my son, the one and only Andre Garlick, will be joining us later on in the show, probably around basketball season. Andre will be able to start joining us, so looking forward to his coming on board with us. And look, folks, if there's ever a time to be talking about family, it is now. And that's exactly what House Talk pregame is all about. It's all about family and showing much love to our HBCU family, our Black and brown communities all across the nation and around the world, student and professional athletes, and their families. We have been telling you all season about how excited we are. The House Talk pregame is now a part of the Heritage Sports Radio Network family. And we were really excited last week because our show debuted on HSRN. And now you can catch us every Saturday on HSRN at 11 a.m. for pre-recorded shows with rebroadcast every Saturday night at 10 o'clock. So we're really, really excited to have those two slots. We'll let you know when we'll be switching to HSRN for our Sunday morning live shows. It's coming real soon, y'all. So needless to say, there's some great stuff coming down the pike, and we're really excited about it. And we have a ton of information that we're going to chat it up about today. Jared?
Good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well on this beautiful Saturday, depending on where you're located at. Just want to, exactly, we're in Virginia, nice 70 degrees, football weather. But for everyone who is familiar with talk radio, you guys are familiar and used to the, raw, in-your-face talk, the transparency that comes with the show. But now we're even on a new level as we're attacking a lot of the current situations we're seeing in today's time with everything that's going on with the pandemic, the HBCU notoriety that we're now seeing, the racial injustices that's going on. We hit on all of that to give you guys real knowledge and make some discoveries and sharing our truth as people. We know you guys care. We know that you guys are tired, and we have the answers for all of you guys, and it's time to optimize. Take it over, Ronnie.
Thank you, Jared, and good morning to everybody. Hope everybody's having a blessed Saturday so far. So during the show today, we'll be taking call-in questions and comments by simply dialing direct at 515-605-9744, or email your HBCU shout-outs, questions, or comments to hdpregame@gmail.com. We want to hear from everybody during the show, so go ahead and call and engage with us. Back to you, Dr. Pitts.
So you hear us talking every week about this new thing that we decided to add to House Talk called Diagnosis of the Week. And the reason why we do that is because we understand that mental wellness is a major area of focus that we really need to be putting more spotlight on in Black and brown communities. So we decided that we're going to start educating you and hopefully empowering you where your mental wellness is concerned. So every week we present you with some information on a mental health disorder, and we just bring you up to speed as to what it is, what you should be looking for, and some ideas about how you can treat it and make sense of it. So today, our diagnostic of the week is conduct disorder. And conduct disorder is a repetitive and persistent pattern of behavior in which the basic rights of others or major age-appropriate societal norms or rules are violated. And, we don't go into, and certainly we can. You can reach out to us and we can give you some more information, or you can certainly look this information up. We don't go into all the specific anal retentive details about the criteria, but just really wanting to highlight some things for you that you may want to pay attention to and definitely be looking at. So when you think about conduct disorder as it relates to some of the symptomology that goes with it, we see people that suffer from conduct disorder tend to show aggression towards people and sometimes animals. They often bully, threaten, or intimidate other people. They may often initiate physical fights. They may have used a weapon that can cause serious physical harm to others, such as a bat, a brick, a broken bottle, a knife, or a gun. They've been physically cruel to people. They've been physically cruel to animals. They've stolen while confronting a victim, has forced someone into sexual activity. There may be some involvement in destruction of property. We see a lot of people with conduct disorder that have issues with deceitfulness and theft, and serious violation of rules. Now, one of the things that I was saying to Ronnie and Jared before we came on the air is that, when you're talking about conduct disorder, there doesn't have to be the presence of every single solitary line item that's listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or what we call the DSM-5. But there does have to be a presence for a window of time of some of those key symptoms. And one of the things that I said to the guys before we came on the air is that, some of these symptoms we see ever present in society today, in individuals' behavior that are in the spotlight. So when we talk about conduct disorder, we talk about people with limited prosocial emotions. So these individuals may show a lack of remorse or guilt. They may present as callous and lack empathy. They may also be shallow or deficient in affect. And I will tell you that oftentimes we see the symptoms for conduct disorder that shows up in persons before the age of 13. And it can carry on over into adulthood. And there's no cure for conduct disorder. What we know is that people with these types of disturbances in their behavior encounter significant impairment socially, at times academically, and also in their occupations. And when I think about so much of the behavior that we're seeing going on in our nation right now, I find myself looking at the behavior and the situations and circumstances through a clinical lens that informs me that there are definitely some people in positions of power and authority that have some mental illness going on that is not or does not appear to the eye of us regular citizens, that it's being properly addressed, or that people are even taking the presentation of these symptoms seriously. And I think that it is definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration. So before I turn it over to Ronnie to give you some treatment and what have you, I want to talk for just a couple of seconds about, what causes conduct disorder. And what we know is that there are many factors that contribute to the development of conduct disorder. And interestingly enough, one of those things is damage to the frontal lobe of the brain has definitely been connected to conduct disorder. And this is the part of the brain that regulates cognition, including problem solving, memory, and emotional expression. Sound a little familiar? The frontal lobe in an individual with conduct disorder may not work the way it should. and can cause a lack of impulse control. Seems to be a lot of impulse control going on in the world today. Reduction in ability to properly plan, and less ability to learn from one's negative experiences. So, and it's also been connected to dysfunction in the family. So yeah, I think that there are definitely some people in our midst that are suffering from this disorder and other mental illness that fall in the same category. Ronnie?
Yeah, when you were explaining that, Dr. Pitts, I was over here contemplating on who you could be talking about or what group of people you could be talking about, but we'll save that for a separate conversation. So conduct disorder, as Dr. Pitts was explaining, is something that typically onsets before the age of 13 in children. Is 6 times more likely to affect boys than it is girls. And I've actually had a client who was diagnosed with conduct disorder. He had childhood onset conduct disorder as a result of significant and extreme trauma he experienced in his early childhood. So some of the treatments for conduct disorder, as Dr. Pitts was saying, there is no necessarily known cure for conduct disorder. We in the mental health field, we try hard not to, especially for our boys and girls of color, we try very hard not to label them things such as like conduct or, DMDD, which is the child version of bipolar disorder and things like that, because the stigmas associated with these disorders are, typically negative. As Dr. Pitts was explaining some of the symptoms and some of the causes of conduct disorder, when your brain starts to develop these mindsets and these behaviors, they're negative. They're negative mindsets or negative behaviors, typically because your mind's in a state of survival. You've never had that care and that love from an early age, if it was childhood trauma or, damage to the frontal lobe. So your brain, typically has negative mindsets and behaviors associated with it. So as far as medications go, there's no medications formally approved to treat conduct disorder. However, various drugs are used to treat some of the distressing symptoms such as the impulsivity, aggression, dysregulated mood, as well as other mental illnesses that may be present such as ADHD or major depression. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is a form of psychotherapy that we would use with clients to help them identify and change negative thought patterns, self-talk, and beliefs by replacing them with healthy, more positive thoughts, self-talk, and beliefs. And also multi-systemic therapy, which conceptualizes behavior as being linked with various aspects of the multiple systems in which the adolescent is embedded. Another way of saying, they believe that children, adolescents, teens are a product of their environment. The way they talk, the way they act, the way they walk, the way they do things is simply a product of their environment. So in multi-systemic therapy, they work with the families, peers, schools, and neighborhoods. Interventions are designed for all levels to, 1, promote disengagement from deviant peers, 2, build stronger bonds to the family and school, and 3, enhance family skills such as monitoring and discipline and developing greater social and academic competence in the adolescent. And last but not least, remember, for parents or anybody who's dealing with a child who has conduct disorder, try to not personalize their behaviors. As I was saying, a lot of times these kids have gone through extreme forms of trauma, a lot of abuse in their early childhood. So try not to personalize their attacks or their words to you. Oftentimes that's their way of protecting themselves or rejecting you, or what we would call self-sabotaging to protect themselves. In many ways, the role of a parent is appropriate. Being fair with the child, being consistent, and being available are the greatest and most needed gift you can give these adolescents, because, like I said, many of them have never experienced this before. Back to you, Dr. Pitts.
Yeah, and as you were talking, Ronnie, I was thinking about, how important it is for our listeners to know that so oftentimes parents don't get it, right? Parents don't understand how their demands, their parenting style, their influence, their own engagement in these types of behaviors really serve as a prototype for their children. So oftentimes, we've heard the expression, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, or the old cliche, chip off the old block. Well, that applies in so many cases, and you said it best. Children are products of their environment. So when we see the presence of conduct disorder and other other disorders that will fall under the category of antisocial personality disorder, it really makes us clinically take a step back and say, what happened to this person? Because clearly it's learned behavior. And then as we're wrapping this part of the show up, I just want to add that you cannot reason with insanity. So for individuals that tend to be dismissive, or, the 2020 word since George Floyd is complicit in their response to the, clinically we call it dysregulation, societal calls it erratic behavior that one might see others demonstrate, in where they're showing the presence of irrational thinking, they're showing the presence of even petulant, childlike, immature behaviors as adults, and that list could go on and on and on. It is imperative that people surrounding these individuals not co-sign the presence of mental instability. I recognize that, people oftentimes have their own agendas, and that's why they don't hold others accountable when these extreme behaviors occur. However, we're doing others a tremendous disservice and an injustice when we don't illuminate and address the problematic nature of these types of behaviors. So on that note, I'm going to conclude that, and we will move on. Every week we do shout outs to HBCUs because we recognize that, one, it's important, but two, particularly in these trying times that we're living in, we all truly agree that it's important for Black and brown persons nationally and internationally to be informed about our HBCUs and all of the greatness that they're providing to us as people of color. As I say every week, it's not taking anything away from the predominantly Caucasian schools, but understanding that with the increasing uncertainty that we're encountering in the nation and around the world today, I just believe that now more than ever before that it's really important to have the love, the support, the guidance, the direction, the nurturance, and the safety, if you will, that comes from being with people in family. So to that point, my shout outs for this week are Coppin State University in Baltimore, Maryland. Coppin was founded in 1900. It offers 32 undergraduate and 11 graduate degrees, along with 9 certificate programs and 1 doctorate program. Coppin State is a multi-generational learning environment nationally recognized for community engagement. It's part of the MEAC Conference, which is the Mid-Eastern Atlantic Conference, and the NCAA, which is the National Collegiate Athletic Association, Division I. Their men's varsity teams compete in baseball, basketball, cross country, tennis, indoor and outdoor track and field. And their women's teams compete in basketball, bowling, cross country, softball, tennis, indoor and outdoor track and field, and volleyball. Notable alumni are Joe Pace, the former NBA player. He was with the Washington Bullets before they became the Wizards. Stephanie Reddy was the first female NBA affiliate coach. Larry Stewart was also an NBA star who also played with the former Washington Bullets and the Seattle Supersonics. Donald Glover, a political analyst, radio show host, and personality. And Keith T. Reed, senior editor for the ESPN magazine and the regional floor director for the National Association of Black Journalists. I also want to give some love to Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee, and they were founded June 19th of 1912. They are designated as a high research institution by the Carnegie Classification of Institutions of Higher Education. Tennessee State strives for excellence in programming, offerings, and community engagement. The only state-funded historically Black university in Tennessee. How awesome is that? It's a member school of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and they offer 41 bachelor's degrees, 23 master's degrees, and 8 doctoral degrees. Notable alumni, none other than the Queen herself, Oprah Winfrey, Moses Gunn, who was an actor playing in Roots, Father Murphy, A Man Called Hawk, The Women of Brewster Place, and Heartbreak Ridge, among many, many, many other performances. Ralph Boston, an Olympic gold medalist and the first person to break the 27-foot barrier in the long jump. Joe Gilliam Jr., former quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers for 4 seasons. Edith McGuire Duvall, former Olympic sprinter. And Richard Dent, former NFL defensive end for the Chicago Bears, MVP of Super Bowl 20, and he was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2011. Jared?
Nice. The 2 I'm shouting out are Simmons College of Kentucky and Harris-Stowe State University. Simmons College of Kentucky is located in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a private, historically Black college that was founded in 1879. It's the 107th historically Black college in the country. In 2006 and 2007, since 1930, was the first time that the school actually sponsored any athletic programs. And part of that reason was throughout the Great Depression, they ran into some negative situations where they had to sell the land to University of Louisville. And some notable alumni is Artesia Gilbert. She's the first African-American woman physician in Kentucky. And then also W. Simmons. He's an ex-slave who became the college's second president and namesake. And W.J. Simmons also greatly developed Howard University's teacher training programs. And sports, they currently have a men's basketball team and a women's basketball team for the sports at Simmons College. And then the second is Harris-Stowe State University. It's located in St. Louis, Missouri, and it was founded in 1857. They offer 50 majors, minors, and certificate programs in education. They're a member of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. A notable alumni, Bobby Wilkes. He's an aviator, and he was the first African-American promoted to captain Coast Guard. And then another notable is Arlene Ackerman. She's a former superintendent of public schools in the District of Columbia, San Francisco, and Philadelphia. The sports that they currently have for men's is baseball, basketball, soccer, track. Women's, they have soccer, basketball, track, and volleyball. And that's pretty surprising to me that I don't know a HBCU that I've been to personally that has a soccer team for men's or women's. So that's, something that's surprising. Yeah. You can go ahead, Ronnie. I'll close out.
All right, so the 2 schools I'm doing this week are Payne College and Allen University. So for Payne College, they were founded in 1883, and they're located in Augusta, Georgia. Payne College was founded by the leadership of the Methodist Episcopal Church South, now known as United Methodist Church, and the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, now known as the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. Payne was the brainchild of Bishop Lucius Henry Hoseley, who first expressed the idea for the college in 1869. Bishop Hosley asked leaders in the ME Church South to help establish a school to train Negro teachers and preachers so that they might, in turn, appropriately address the educational and spiritual needs of the people newly freed from the evils of slavery. They agreed to name the school in honor of the late Bishop Robert Payne of the Methodist Episcopal Church, who had helped organize the CME Church. The Payne Institute began with a high school component and gradually developed a college department. Initially, advanced students received special instruction on an individual basis, but by 1903, sufficient college-level work was provided to justify changing the school's name to the Payne College. Payne continued his high school department until 1945 because there was no public secondary school for blacks in Augusta until that year. Notable alumni is rapper and producer Pastor Troy and singer and songwriter Freddie Scott, who had a top 10 hit back in 1963 called Hey Girl. For Allen University, they were founded in 1870 in Columbia, South Carolina. So a fun fact, well, not a fun fact, but a very interesting fact. So during the Depression of 1929, Allen overcame many hardships to keep his doors open. In 1930, the Department of Science was established, followed by a Department of Languages. In these early years, Allen satisfied the needs of his students at all educational levels. The curriculum not only included legal courses, but theology, the arts, and courses at elementary and high school levels. It was possible for a student to enter Allen as a child in the first grade and leave prepared to teach, preach, or prosecute or defend in the courts as fully trained educators, ministers, and lawyers. And a notable alumni for them is Ralph Anderson, who was a Democratic member of the South Carolina Senate, representing the 7th District from 1997 to 2013.
Nice. All right, Jared, so take us in.
We're going to jump into it for our topic of the day, topic of the show, like we always start out with, coming from Feast to Loafers, the book that I authored last November, coming up on the year anniversary, which sheds light on the transition phase for our athletes post-athletics, which often comes with some struggles mentally, socially, emotionally, and it gives ideologies and steps that they can take to ensure that they're successful in their transition, as well as those around them, parents, coaches, guardians, things like that, and gives an insight into the mind of athletes as they're on this journey. And the title for today is There Is More to Me, and Chase the Vision, Not the Dream. And what I mean by there is more to me, that's talking to the athlete, but also talking to those around the athlete, the guardians who, raise them up, the coaches who may have not seen, anything outside of their athletic skills or their football skills, and what they have to offer the world. Also, chase the vision, not the dream. That's something that I believe holds true to a lot of our athletes when you're on this journey to make it to the NFL, the NBA, the WNBA, whatever sport it is. You typically have a vision from that dream of making it, and that vision is what it can do for your family or what it can do for yourself or what it can do for, your ability to help others in your community or your ability to help, have a platform and change the world. That's the vision that dream gives you. And I think that, we're going to talk a little bit about how us as athletes, we need to be able to realize that the vision that we have is more than capable of being carried out, whether you achieve your dream of making it to the NFL or not. And just to speak on my personal situation, I know my dream, of course, was to play NFL, like a lot of kids. But the vision on making it to the NFL was being able to help others. That was one of the main things, to help my family out, to start up family businesses, because the finances that you would have from a long-term NFL contract give you the opportunity to do that. The ability to, put my mother in a situation where she can go into a passion that she has, which is interior decorating and things like that. All of those things that I thought I wanted to do, I was holding myself back and was waiting to get to the NFL. So we're going to talk about that in this show. I'll go into a little more detail about that. And Ronnie, you have, or would you say, like, your dream was to make it to the NFL, but if you made it to the NFL, what would you say your life would look like if everything went the way that you wanted it to look?
Wow.
Oh man, that's a great question. And that's a question I used to always think about as I was growing up. Man, if things would have gone the way I wanted to when I was playing football and I made it to the NFL, one of the first things I would have done was, repay my parents for all the sacrifices they made for me growing up, taking me to camps all up and down the East Coast, coming to every game, not missing games, making sure I had, food to eat, making sure I had, time to rest, make sure I had time to train for football and things like that. So taking care of them, making sure they would never have to work another day in their life. And, like I've always said, I always knew outside of football I wanted to help people in some way, shape, or form, even if it wasn't doing counseling, just being able to give people the chance to realize their dreams. So definitely giving back to the community I grew up in, the Matoka and Etcher community, giving back to my high school, making sure that, the student athletes in high school are able to have a support system to get them to college so they can chase their dreams and their vision. Yeah, I think that's definitely how I would envision it being. Yeah, that was a great question, man.
Now, with that being said, and Dr. Pitts, you chime in whenever you want. I know I asked Ronnie because he played football, of course, and same situation as me pretty much. But now that was your vision and everything. I was, I had a vision and things like that. But once you realize that that situation is not going to become a reality, now how did your vision change? Did you feel kind of discouraged because now you're looking at yourself like, dang, how am I going to make sure my parents don't work again? Because a lot of times when you're growing up, the only way you can think of retiring your mother or anybody that you want to repay as an African-American male, 9 times out of 10, is playing football or basketball. So has your vision for your life changed after your football career ended, or are you still pursuing those same, that same vision?
It has changed. Not much, but I would say, I guess, how I plan to get to achieving that vision has changed. After playing football, like I said, I knew I studied sociology in undergrad, and I knew that once I realized that my football career was not going to go to the NFL or be able to play professionally at any level, I turned all my efforts into counseling and things like that. Now, as far as, I think every guy's dream, who's played sports is, pay back their parents and things like that. Now, of course, a counselor's salary is nowhere near somebody in the NFL and things like that. But, do I still have that dream of being able to provide not only for my wife and, our future family, but to be able to put my parents in a position where they wouldn't have to work as hard as they do? Absolutely. I always think about that. And I always think about how I could repay my parents for making the sacrifices they made for me growing up and doing the things they did for me when I was growing up. I always think about that. And I would say now, being an adult, being on my own in the real world, I've learned, I've definitely learned, some financial tips along the way and just career paths that I can take to make sure that I can at least achieve some of those dreams and make some of them visions, come true. So,
right.
Has the vision necessarily changed? No, but how I get to that vision, has that changed? Absolutely.
Right. Now that was key what you said, and then the aspect of like your future family. I think a lot of times, whether an athlete has a child at the moment or they have one, 5 years after they, finish playing, I think that's one of the, tough aspects of the transition phase, because that vision that you had, to start a family, you may feel more confident and comfort in starting a family, if you were in the NFL and you were, making X amount of dollars a game. You pretty much, as long as you're responsible, your family's not going to be lacking anything, that you can't provide as far as the intangible things. We're not talking about love or, attention, things like that. Of course, in any situation, somebody can give somebody, love and things like that. But I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people sometimes go off the deep end, is because their vision that they have, they only see it through the lens of a football helmet, basically. And like you said,
Absolutely.
trying to find get to that vision, And that's why I think like football is a vehicle, and it's a great vehicle. You know, if gone about the right way, like it really can give you the tools to get to the vision you want, to help your family, to retire your mother, to help your community. But once that vehicle does not work anymore, like it's a must find another vehicle that can get us to the same destination. It may take another route, you know, it may route you, but I don't think that, you know, an athlete should fall into, you know, sadness or confusion or depression because that path is now closed off. You just have to make a detour, like a lot of people say. And I think that's, if we can overcome that part of the transition phase, I think that a lot of people would definitely see, you know, greater results, you know, getting to whatever success is for them and their families.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that.
I think that, and you know, in light of us just becoming aware that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been announced the winners of the presidential election. Congratulations to both of them. What a historic and a momentous occasion. And to that point, you know, we were hearing all week that there were a number of paths, if you will, especially in the beginning of the week, right? We were hearing that there were a number of paths to the presidency. And what I want to say to that is there are a number of paths that one can take to achieve greatness and excellence and to pursue and achieve your dreams and to see your vision made manifest. I think that one of the mistakes that scholar athletes and just regular old folks make is only having one plan. And, you know, we've talked about this on previous shows. It's like, what happened to a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, right? I think that wisdom says that we must have a backup plan because what we know to be true about life, it almost never turns out the way we think. So,
absolutely.
like, why would you, you know what I mean? Like, why would you box yourself in? And what I say to people is this. I am a firm believer of not only not boxing yourself in, not restricting yourself to one way to achieve the things that you desire to achieve. I believe that it's important to throw the box away and do not limit yourself to what you can achieve, what you can have, you know, take the limits off. You know, I mean, I've been, you know, a woman of color. I've been a person of color my whole life. So I think about some of the limitations, if you will, that I faced growing up, and not just physical limitations, but cognitive limitations within the context of how people viewed success and prosperity and wealth and hopes, goals, dreams, and aspirations, right? I find it very interesting that the Bible talks in Habakkuk 2 about write the vision and make it plain. And I grew up in a Christian home, but yet there wasn't a vision. I mean, it just wasn't. The goal was go to work, to a job that you hate, make enough money to pay your bills so you don't struggle, save some money, try to buy a house, and don't be a criminal. You know what I mean? But beyond that, it was what I've always referred to as very limited thinking. And it's not taking anything from anybody in my family. I mean, I love them and I care about them, but that difference in thinking is what always contributed to me feeling like a fish out of water or the black sheep of the family. Because though I never wanted for anything, I always had clothes and food and shelter, but I looked around me and I believed to the depths of my soul that there was more and different and better that I could experience than what I saw going on around me every day. And there have been times in my life where I've been looked at sideways because of those aspirations. So what I say to our listening audience is this: do not make the mistake of thinking that there's only one way for you to achieve greatness and excellence and to, achieve a wealthy place and all of that. Ronnie, as you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that you sort of like had this simultaneous thing going on, right? Where you wanted to go to the NFL, but you wanted to help people. So you know what I'm going to say, right? Start your own agency.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
that is definitely something that's definitely in the thought process and in the works, especially after I complete my master's degree. We can definitely make those things come true.
Yeah. There's so many ways. Look, and for you all that are athletes, I would say less painful ways too.
Yeah, that is true.
Just saying. Other ways to not have to get beat up and knocked around all the time.
And I think for today's student athletes, that's gonna go from, like you were saying, it's gonna kind of go from where you have that choice to kind of explore other things outside of that to where it's gonna be you have to have multiple plans in place, not because plan A may fail, but because plan A it isn't just going to be enough to support you and your family. You're gonna plan B and C are gonna have to work as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. I got a question for you, Ronnie. Like, talking about chasing the vision and the dream, and you had already said what your vision was. Once you would make it to the NFL in the ideal world. But my question, to be honest, is when you were growing up. Of course, I know you love football and things like that. But when it was hot outside, when you didn't feel like running hills, when you didn't feel like getting up at 5 o'clock or however early you get up to work out, or the pushing through the last set in the week. Behind that, is to be the best athlete you can to get the starting position. But at the depth of what was the real push behind it? Was it making it to the NFL to be an NFL star, or was it making it to the NFL to have that vision of being able to take care of your mom? Like, okay, I'm running this last rep. I got to do it for, my family. I have to do it for, the future kids that I want to help, or the future kids that I want to have, versus I just love the game. Because for me, when I reflected and looked back on it, I love the game. I still love it and things like that. But I was more so obsessed with what it could do for me rather than what I could do on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Absolutely. Wow. And I would say that's definitely my answer as well. I mean, you're right. You have to be. I always tell people it's a privilege to have been able to play college football, even though people say, well, it was at a D2 level and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's still a privilege to play college football. Don't let nobody ever tell you different. And for me, like I said, one of the things I'm grateful that my parents instilled in me at a young age was the idea and the concept of hard work and outworking people in order to achieve what you wanted. So, during those, those training days and those days when you're, doing the little things to prepare for football or anything like that, that was my motivation, was to make sure that, I could put my family in a position to where they didn't have to work the hours they worked or the multiple jobs that they had to work, and just to provide for me and our family. So that was always my motivation. Of course, did I love the game of football and things like that? Absolutely. There was nothing like Friday nights in high school and Saturdays in college and things like that. I can't tell people how Sundays are in the NFL, unfortunately. But, I mean, just, playing on Fridays and Saturdays was a blessing in itself. And, but the goal to be the best person I could be and to even have that chance to make it to the NFL was to, be able to provide for my family and be that person that, my parents could sit there and say, he didn't take our hard work and sacrifices for granted. He optimized everything we did for him. And, even though they would never ask for payback or repayment or anything like that, just to give them that opportunity or to give them that blessing was always my deepest driving desire.
Yeah, because I think, like, when you watch draft, every time when you see them on the red carpet, 99% is the athlete and it's their mother. And when they interview them, they ask what's the first thing you're going to buy? What was your motivation behind it? If they do a story, it always comes back to a common is the mother for the most part. I'm not excluding fathers or anything like that, but it is what it is. And it's like we go through so much sacrifice to have that vision come true. And this just makes me think, like, just imagine if that vision that we have for our lives, we can put that same amount of effort getting up at 5 a.m, running in 120-degree weather if you want to surf and it gets that hot, like all to see that vision come true, but we still oftentimes neglect other vehicles that we can use at the same time as the football vehicle to get to that vision. And I don't know when or, it's like kids they're in middle school, 6th grade, and their Instagram profile says class of like 2026 or whatever, or 2028. And I'm like, why are we putting that on our youth to feel obligated to instantly become a phenom, to reach whatever vision they want to have and retire their mother? Why can't they be in the 8th grade and in their Instagram profile it says future CEO of Microsoft or engineer or
absolutely
or anything like that? Because like it's like society, I don't know what it is, but it just really pigeonholes African American young men, young women, and even other people from other races sometimes, depending on their upbringing. But it's like we're constantly pigeonholed to believe that football is the only way that we can get to have any success if we're not a rapper. And it makes me sick. So this is a little offbeat, but a lot of times it just leads to destruction, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with the rapper who just died, King Von, who's from Chicago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he just died yesterday. You pigeonhole him into this person that he believes he can be, coming from, Chicago. We all know it's a very impoverished area, certain parts violent. But it's like he just pigeonholed himself into that situation where he talked about it on every song, basically, because that's what he knew. And then ultimately that's exactly the same way that he died. So pigeonholing us is only causing a lot of destruction for us. And like me, I'm fed up with it. Like I have a little cousin, she's 15 or 16. This whole time during the election, she's been like CNN. She's been telling us every single thing about politics that I've never even learned in school. And it just amazes me, and I'm happy that she's actually doing that, where she can be a politician one day instead of, and there's nothing wrong with it, but instead of being in the WNBA. Like Dr. Pitt said, it's less painful way. And I just think we have to have a better balance of it.
I think to your point, your question about the pigeonhole and what's going on, it's systemic. It's this systemic negative paradigm that we as a people, more frequently than not, because we know it's not the case in every Black and brown home, but more frequently than not, so it appears that this emphasis is placed upon one's athletic ability rather than one's cognitive ability. And it reminds me, we've talked on previous shows about whether or not, these arguments and debates that exist in society today about whether or not the Willie Lynch letter or the Lynch letter was real, whether it was or not. One of the things that we see that's pervasive in Black and brown communities all over the nation is this notion, keep the body strong and the mind weak. Well, how many times have you all heard me say that the conditions, many of which we see in Black and brown communities, is rooted in what I believe, the residual effects of slavery and all of the other atrocities that have served to keep us oppressed all of these years. Well, how do you keep a person physically oppressed? I just believe that you first must oppress their mind. And you convince people that what they see going on around them every day is as good as it's going to get. And I'm about to share something with you that I need you both to hold on to your seats, because I'm like, there it is. So I just, on the fly, as you were talking, when you were talking about, athletics versus, say, the corporate arena or what have you, there being multiple paths to achieving one vision, right? I just happened to do a search to find out the difference between the average salary of an HBCU football coach and the average salary of a Division I football coach. Any guesses?
Hundreds of millions of.
Yeah.
The average salary of an HBCU football coach is $75,687. The average salary of a Division I football coach is $6 to $9 million.
Goodness.
Yeah, I believe it. And I mean,
there's something very wrong with that picture.
Absolutely. And I think a good amount of that, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, is, alumni support and, those schools having boosters who pour in millions and millions of dollars to those programs. And they basically run the programs. People think it's the athletic director or the president, but no, it's the boosters and the donors who run those schools. That's a large. I was thinking, because I know at the D1 HBCUs, the head coach makes on average of maybe anywhere from 120 to 170. But then after that, the coordinators probably make about between 40 and 70, and then it's a free fall for the assistant coaches.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because
no, go ahead, Jared.
They're doing. It's not like school. They're doing like they have some new technology for coaching with making do different stuff. They're doing the same thing, and sometimes it makes it a little tougher for HBCU. You're dealing with less resources. Of course, they're not going to have money, but it's like the same exact regimen is being applied.
Yep.
And the difference. That's what. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It speaks to, and when you think about it, even in the corporate arena, right? There's this gaping hole between the earning power, potential, and average salaries of other people in comparison to people of color. And when you look, for example, at the number of people of color that hold CEO or CFO or COO positions at Fortune 500 companies, it's limited in the grand scheme of things. So I get, don't mistake. I do understand why there's this push for athletic achievement. But what I'm saying is that there has to be an alternative, more positive and productive way that isn't being a drug kingpin in your community.
Right.
There are so many fields that look, for example, at the law firm that is representing George Floyd's family and Breonna Taylor's family and Arbery's family. That firm, they're doing the darn thing. And when you pull up their website, I mean, you talk about a powerhouse team of attorneys of color. We look at Johnny Cochran, right? We look at, everybody doesn't want to be a lawyer, but we touched on one show about HVAC techs and things like that. I think that to the point of what we've been saying for quite some time, that if HBCUs would incorporate wealth management and financial management and all of the things that go into creating wealth, I think they will be extremely beneficial. I would suffice it to say, though we know it's highly unlikely that it would happen at the high school level as well, because so many of these children are not going to get this appropriate education at home, which is also unfortunate. But people don't know what they don't know, right? And it goes back to what we said before. People are limited in their thinking, not because they want to be, but just simply because they don't know any better. So for those of us that do know better, I believe that it's incumbent upon us to educate and empower for the purpose of liberation whenever and wherever we can. And you know, that's a major part of what House Talk does, and you know what each of us are doing out in the field and in our respective, you know, other positions that we hold. I think that it's all about education, and it's, you know, we always say we're not trying to be spiritually deep or anything like that, but we are of the Christian faith, so you know, biblical principle is what we try to govern our lives by. But the Bible says that my people perish for lack of knowledge. And I think that is a major, major, major issue within Black and brown communities far too frequently, all across the nation, that people are perishing because they're just not receiving the information that they need to make well-informed decisions. And quite frankly, decisions that are needed to be made in order to break the cycle of systemic poverty and lack and illiteracy and so many other factors that are impacting their families for multiple generations.
Yeah, no, you hit that on. Yeah, so back to your point, it brought up a thought in my mind when you mentioned the huge pay gap between HBCU coaches and, you know, the PWIs, the major D1s. So let's say it's a player who played, you know, good college football player. He, for whatever reason, he doesn't go to the NFL, or after he retires from the NFL, he wants to be a coach. Now, let's say he doesn't make the NFL, and he still has that vision to do what the NFL could have done for him and his family. Knowing the pay gap at a HBCU and a Division I, if he wants to be a coach, does his vision now include going back to an HBCU, because he knows the HBCU is not going to provide me the same or at least similar type of money that I would have possibly made in the NFL? So are we including HBCU, you know, African-American coaches going to HBCUs because they know that they're not going to be compensated at what they would like to? Because I think that's why you see a lot of them at the big D1 schools, because it's the money. And it's like you're not only taking away from athletes, our athletes going to HBCUs, now you're taking away from our best African-American coaches in some situations. There's great coaches at the HBCU level, but, I mean, there's some great coaches at D1s that could really change the HBCU program if the money was right.
I think, Jared, to answer your question, and it may seem like an extreme response, but it's just something that I believe. It makes me think about Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and the pioneers of the civil rights movement who understood that one person can make a difference, but when forces are united, the reason why I frame it that way is this. I believe that if all it's ever going to be is the norm, then there's absolutely no reason for anything to change. Someone has to be willing to be the pioneer of a movement that brings about the necessary systemic change to move us in a different direction as a people. And no one is disputing for a moment that people don't need to be able to take care of their families. What I'm saying is that even for those individuals, I'm using this as an example, even for those individuals that were born into wealth, somebody somewhere in the lineage of that person that was born into wealth started with nothing, right? You didn't just clap your hands and wake up wealthy one day. Somebody in the lineage had to make the decision to build. And I think that that's where we get duped as a people, is that we don't, and I get it. It's, again, I believe that it's attributed to the residual effects of slavery and the systemic oppression that we have encountered for hundreds of years. But I believe that because we don't operate from the same ideologies that, say, Jewish people do, or people of Asian descent do, I think that they have a formula that can be replicated.
Right.
And we know historically, right? It's, I have often said to Andre, with how I've taught him over the years, is I didn't teach him in many ways based upon what I was taught. I taught him based upon the individuals that were in my life contributing to me and adding value to me, both of color and from the dominant culture, that are at a socioeconomic status and a level of success personally and professionally that surpassed anything I had ever experienced growing up, if that makes sense. So he understands that in order to achieve certain levels of success in life, it truly does require thinking differently than the processes he saw going on around him growing up in both sides of his family. I think it's the way of thinking that needs to be changed, but somebody has to be willing to start the movement. People have to be willing, if you will, to be the sacrificial lambs.
Right. Yeah.
I 1,000% agree with that. And I think as far as HBCUs go, and I know this is, I guess you can consider him an extreme example because of his already status and fame as it is, but, seeing what Deion Sanders does with Jackson State University, taking that leap to be a head coach, even though he necessarily doesn't have any college coaching experience prior to taking this job, the fact that somebody of his stature, who he's considered one of the greatest defensive players of all time and the greatest defensive back of all time, so somebody of his stature to be able to go to a school like Jackson State, and hopefully this is the turn of something where we see other African-American, whether they were great players or just coaches from, bigger schools decide to come to HBCUs. We'll see how that goes. And to your point, Dr. Fitz, about somebody having to be the sacrificial lamb in the lineage, that's something that I think, like you said, we kind of overlook, or we just kind of take it for granted because we have that fear of missing out or that fear of being without, because that's something that we've been oppressed from. We've been, segregated from for 400 years. Having that generational wealth, having those generational opportunities that we don't necessarily have to, down somebody who looks just like us just to get our own personal gain. Right. I always tell people, generational wealth or break generational curses, you have to be the one who you might not see the results, or you might not be able to benefit from your hard work or your sacrifice. Your generation of age or your community, it might take you to have to make those sacrifices in order for your family and others to reap those benefits as well. And I think a lot of our brothers and sisters, they don't want to. I don't think they don't want to, but it's just they feel like, well, hell, I was sacrificed. I was robbed of these opportunities. My family was robbed of the opportunities. Why can't I enjoy it myself? And sometimes that's a hard thing to, process and deal with. So that takes somebody who has a level of self-awareness and self-fulfillment to be okay with that.
Now, like on that Deion Sanders topic and, the sacrificial lamb, I agree 100% that it's going to take an athlete or whatever, they're going to have to be the sacrificial lamb. But would you say that his son committed to go to Jackson State, would you say it's sacrificial lamb for the situation, for the HBCU culture? Because I don't agree. So what do y'all agree? Do y'all think he is, or this is going to start a movement? Because I have a different outlook on it. I want to hear what y'all think.
He said in an interview, I couldn't pass up an opportunity to help level the playing field and pursue equality for HBCUs. Dad, I got your back. I think that speaks volumes. I think that I think he is potentially sending a message to student athletes of color that there's something greater at play here than just the athletic component. I take what he said very seriously. Like, I don't think that he was just saying that. I think he means that. And the reason why I think he means that is because he was raised to know that. When you look at the fact that his father came from humble beginnings in Florida, there's more. There's discussions. We know what prime time was like back in the day, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you all might not, but I sure did.
Highlight.
He off the field. Deion Sanders was a completely different dude than what he is now. He was something. He was something else. He was blinging for days, and he was prime time. He was something else.
Like with that being said, I don't mean to cut you off. With that being said, if we're looking at a true sacrificial lamb in this idea of a top athlete going to an HBCU and having the reality of, okay, if I go to this HBCU, I may lose out on being first draft pick. I may not get drafted. When you're looking at it from this perspective, and I hope he does good and everything like that, I'm pretty sure he will. But you're talking about a kid who grew up in a household with a Hall of Fame NFL player. Regardless of whatever school he goes to, he's going to the NFL just because of the name on the back of his jersey. And then to know that he grew up in an environment where I'm pretty sure they're pretty well taken care of. Some of all of the fruits of the labor, that Deion Sanders has put forward, like you said, coming from humble beginning. That was probably his motivation and his vision to see what he has now, his family taken care of. And he's able to be in a position where he can take that job at Jackson State instead of at Florida State, where it would be, more less pay, whatever. But I think a true sacrificial lamb is a kid that is coming from a home where his dad is not an NFL Hall of Famer. They don't grow up in a mansion. And the fact that if they get to the point where their dream does not come true, they're risking a lot more for themselves and their future family than Deion Sanders' son is. He does not make it to the NFL and have a successful career. And I think once you see somebody come from that situation, where they don't have notoriety from a parent or pool, and they become successful from an HBCU in the NFL, and you consistently see our athletes from HBCUs getting drafted in the first or fourth rounds on a regular basis, that's when I believe you're really going to start seeing a lot of these kids going to these HBCUs, because I helped coach at a high school. And it's sad to say, but none of them, their first decision is not an HBCU, because the probability, the likelihood of them making it to the NFL is very slim. So they're not going to want to be that sacrificial lamb, because they're like, if I don't make it, my mother is good. If Deion Sanders' son doesn't make it, his mother is good. And that's the reality of it. And that's what I want to see happen, where these athletes do start getting drafted from HBCUs, and that's going to be the real telltale sign of it changing. And it's going to take, I hope that he pushes this envelope to where he's at Jackson State, and it brings kids to Jackson State. And maybe in that conference, you're probably going to see a lot of kids go to that conference because the competition level is going to go up. But it's going to have to spread throughout the country. And it's going to take a real sacrificial lamb, like a 5-star recruit who comes from nothing, to go to HBCU and become successful. That's my take on it. That's what I really think.
But doesn't that go back to what we said, it was either last week or the week before, when we were talking about the recruiters will go where the players are, right?
Yeah.
So is it really about the D1 experience? Because and here's the thing, and I'm just, I'm just stirring the pot. But my thought is, For real. My thought is you talk about somebody having to be willing to start a movement. Here's a stat for you, and y'all know this, but I'm saying it for the sake of our listeners. 3.8% of draft-eligible Division I players were chosen in the 2019 NFL Draft. That was 249 out of 6,490 eligible players. 249 out of 6,490. Splitting this calculation into subdivisions, 6.8% of FBS players were estimated to be drafted. That's 238 out of 3,491, as compared to the 0.4% of FCF players, which was 11 out of 2,999. Here's the moral to the story, fellas. I can't tell folk what to do. Dre 32, he'll be 33 in May, and it's hit and miss. But I'm a rebel, right? And what my brain says is freaking revolt. My brain says, you know what? If all these top-notch recruits were to make the decision to go to HBCUs instead of the D1 schools, hello, 75% of the league is men of color. Where the recruiters gonna go?
All right, they're not going to Harvard for that.
Thank you. It's supply and demand, baby.
Yeah, but
it's supply and demand.
Like this morning, just watching. I saw a couple minutes of College Game Day, and it was in my mind. I'm like, all these kids are waking up, and that's what they're seeing. Like, they're just seeing College Game Day at Virginia Tech, at USC, at Alabama. Like, it's just so pushed into their face. Like, that's the only thing they want you to think about. Like, imagine growing up and there was College Game Day for HBCU. I guarantee a lot of people would have wanted to go to HBCU.
If the players all across the country, if the black and brown high school scholar athletes all across the country, if some sort of campaign was started and was like, you know what, we boycotting D1 schools, we going to HBCUs, where the recruiters going? Let's keep that real. The league is 75% black and brown athletes. Yes. Where is the league going to go? Where's the league going? Where are they going to go to recruit?
They're going to
go to HBCUs to recruit. And you can't. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the recruits won't care. They're going to go to them HBCUs if they got to stand up on the gate. HBCUs are. They're going to look at that talent.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Would you all agree or disagree that people tend, not just us as people of color, but people tend to, human nature oftentimes is to function and to make decisions from a place of fear and apprehension and worry and anxiety. The what ifs. And what I always told Andre and continue to tell him, you got a 50-50 shot here. So if you are you going to these combines, you going to these camps, you mean to tell me if there started to be a recruit campaign encouraging black and brown scholar athletes at the high school level to make the decision to go to HBCUs, that these recruiters are not going to be beating down the doors of these HBCU coaches?
They are.
Come on now, for real. Like, for real. People are like, oh, no, they're going to keep going to the D1 schools. Right. They're going to get all their running backs and their coaches. No, that's some bull snaggle. And y'all know it.
Now, with that statement being said, let's say, okay, the Division I HBCUs are getting all of the, a lot of the top players. There's a lot of top players at the Division II level that could have D1 talent. Would you say that the D2 level would still suffer a little bit, even if the D1 HBCU level takes off? Like, do you think the D2 will still be in the same boat, or that would attract, coaches to want to look at the Division II, even if it's not a 5-star, 4-star recruit going to their school?
I think that it's just like anything else. I think that if it's packaged properly, the D2 schools don't have to suffer, because at the end of the day, and because it's cyclical, fellas, it goes back to what we were saying about the importance of education, right? And we've said on a number of shows that scholar athletes need to be selecting fields of study and an academic path that is going to help them to be successful, whether they go to the league or not, because you're not going to play forever. So when you think about the importance of education in the discussion, what HBCU matches the academic path? Okay, so we'll use Ronnie as an example, right? Ronnie, and you may or may not want to answer, but when you think about your dual goal and your multiple desire to go to the NFL and to also go into the field of counseling, did Virginia State have a competitive counseling program compared, for example, to other HBCUs? So, and it's rhetorical, right? You don't necessarily have to answer that. But what I'm saying is that I think that we have to do a better job of informing our Black and brown scholar athletes so they are equipped and their families are equipped to make a well-informed decision based upon academics and athletics, if that makes sense. So it helps them to not only position themselves to be competitive athletically, but also positions them to be competitively to be competitive in their quest for career success, whether they go to the league or not. The first thing that comes to mind is FAMU sharing its College of Engineering with Florida State University, and it really being a phenomenal program, as well as FAMU's pharmaceutical program and, their business school. So there are opportunities for a dual path that can position our Black and brown scholar athletes to be set up for success in that dual trajectory.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and also, like, getting more exposure to HBCUs as far as, like, their football camps in the summer. I never went to a HBCU football camp anywhere. It was always, like, UMD or something like that. But I think if you get the kids on campus, and like you said, going back to the majors and things like that, I know Bowie State is known for, like, their nursing program. They just built a brand new, like, multi-million-dollar facility just for nursing. So imagine you bring, somebody who's interested in that field, they go on campus and they see that, like, wow, this is compared to, Alabama's nursing center and things like that. So I think once you expose them, like you said, to other things outside of the football field, that's going to intrigue them as well. But it definitely could level the playing field, because a lot of HBCUs, I know it's a lot of talk of, I know with coronavirus, some of them, potentially might be shut down, but it's a lot of HBCUs that have a lot to offer as far as the facilities, the student classrooms, the campus is clean, it's beautiful, it's not dirty like some people may think. Like, it's a lot to benefit.
And we've got some really nice locations too. Like, when I think about the numerous HBCU campuses, excuse me. When I think about the numerous HBCU campuses that I've been on, I've never been on an HBCU campus that wasn't nice. You know what I mean? It's like, and to both of your point, it's like when we consider the notable alum, some of the campuses that I've been on definitely could use an upgrade to their athletic facilities. But if we as a people could come together and provide the same support for our HBCUs as the boosters do at the dominant culture schools, then we would certainly be positioned to be able to improve the overall quality of not just our athletic programs, but our academic programs as well. Andre texted me and commented on the diversity among us as a people. And, just to expand on that thought a little bit, not just diversity within, the different groups that make us up as Black and brown people, but I also think about it within the context of diversity of experience, right? And how much additional value that we can add to each other. I think about being named, a Fulbright scholar and an alumni Fulbright ambassador and being placed upon the Fulbright specialist roster. And I kid you not, more people than a little bit when that press release hit the paper, people were, well, what's that? And then people started to Google it and they were like, oh my God, that's a big deal. Who? And you're Black. Really?
Right.
Or as Andre's dad says, say word. It's like, yeah, I am. But doesn't that speak to the limitations that we experience in too many of our homes as it relates to the world, right? And the additional experiences that we have access to if we would just open our eyes.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that the Camp HBCU experience is a way to contribute to us opening our eyes.
Yeah, and I just want to hit on the topic of just anyone listening, young, older, that have kids concerning HBCU. I know too many to even count people I went to school with, the people I know of that are products of HBCUs and are doing great things in whatever field that they're in. Like, I know some that are in NFL. I know some that are lawyers, some that are doctors, teachers, and they're all stand-up men and women. So, and that's just to debunk that notion of people that have great products. As y'all can see, when we do every week, we do the alumni, and it's people that have very positions, they have high ranking, or they've been the first to do something, first African American to do something. And when you just look at the alumni across all HBCUs, there's so many great people that's there. So greatness is on these campuses. It's just us getting there, in it, and doing, our due diligence.
Yeah. Well, look, we're down. Oh my goodness, this 90 minutes goes by so fast every week. It's like, oh my goodness, where did time go? So we're down to like 7 minutes. But I think, Ronnie, chime in. You've been quiet for a minute. Chime in, and then I'll take us on home.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't want to interrupt y'all. We're making some very great points. While I was listening, some things I just wanted to touch on that y'all had talked about. As far as like the coaches and stuff go, something I was thinking about, and we hear this all the time, especially at the NFL level, the lack of opportunity for African American coaches or people of color to have high-ranking coaching positions in the NFL. And as far as that goes for the HBCU level, when you were all talking about, that 5-star recruit being the quote-unquote sacrificial lamb at a HBCU, one of the things I was thinking about is if a 5-star recruit were to go to a HBCU, whether it was a D1 HBCU or a D2 HBCU, I think the thing remains at the end of the day, if they're a 5-star recruit and they're this good of a football player, then it will show no matter what level they're playing on, whether it's D1, D2, or D3. Now, of course, like Jared was hinting on, of course they'll throw in, HBCU players' face where the level of competition isn't that of the SEC or the ACC and things like that. But at the end of the day, and we've seen this whether it was the 60s, 70s, or, few NFL players here and there, if you come from whatever level you come from, if you stand out, you're going to stand out no matter what, what level of competition you had in college. But I do think that's going to have to happen. And as far as the coaches go, I would say this, and I've talked about it before. One of my former teammates, Trenton Cannon from Virginia State, who plays currently for the Carolina Panthers, one of the biggest reasons he was even able to get a look at the NFL was because of the head coach, Coach Reggie Barlow, who played in the NFL. And one of his teammates was the general manager of the New York Jets, which is the team who drafted Trenton Cannon. So those relationships and that networking plays a big role in it too. And I think until we start to see African American coaches get that level of success at the NFL, where they can coach at a high level and bring up other African American coaches from the college level, whether it's a D1 school or HBCU, whatever the case may be, bringing those coaches up and building that network for our players at HBCUs to get a look. I think that's a big important thing. And to answer your rhetorical question, Dr. Pitts, about whether I had looked at Virginia State's counseling program against other HBCUs, I will say this as far as education goes, and one of the things I kind of learned at an early age was, despite the education, I always felt like I was going to stand out and be, good at whatever I did, no matter where I got my degree from. And I tell people all the time, I'll put my 2 degrees from Virginia State against anybody's, no matter what school they come from, because I see that right now in the counseling field where people go to PWIs and things like that, and their education is no different than mine. It's just they went to a different school and they had different networking opportunities. But outside of that, I feel like my skills as a counselor will always separate me no matter what school I went to. And as far as like checking if they're honestly, even for undergrad, I never really looked at to see where Virginia State was for their programs. But I will say, like Jared was also saying, HBCUs offer a lot of great education opportunities, a lot of great networking opportunities. And you don't realize how many people get a degree from an HBCU until you're in the workforce. I know plenty of people who went to Virginia State. Like, I didn't realize the level of teachers from my own high school who have Virginia State educations because they just didn't talk about it, and you didn't know about it. So, I'm thankful for being able to go to a HBCU and having the network of support I have from Virginia State. And I think if you choose to go to a HBCU as a high school student, whether you're a student athlete or regular student, those are schools that are for you. And like the schools I talked about earlier, those schools were the only schools African Americans could go to. Like Payne College was the only school you could go to for high school as an African American until 1945. So these schools have always been there for us, will always be there for us. So we have to protect these HBCUs at no cost and continue to build them up.
Yeah, for sure.
Jared, you want to say something before I close this out?
No, you can go ahead. I agree with everything Ronnie said. Everything both of you guys said.
Yeah, I think that the bottom line here, folks, is what we're saying is that there's more to you. There is more to you. We obviously are totally in support of the athletic engagement. But in that, though, we want you to understand that there's so much more to you, and helping you to realize that there's more to you is going to come into play, not only when you have hopes, goals, dreams, and aspirations, but also when you have a vision for your future that not only has an arm of it that's the league, whether it be the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, whatever the case may be, but that also has a part to your vision that speaks to the essence of who you are at your core. And there's more at your core than your athletic gifts and talents and abilities. We encourage you to definitely consider HBCUs in your hunt. Parents, don't discount HBCUs just because you think that the D1 school is going to be your ticket to lemonade and a mansion. We want you to consider these HBCUs, and we can start a campaign. We can start a campaign to start filtering these athletes at all levels to these HBCUs, and let's create a shift. We have the power to do it. Let's recognize it. Until next week, this is House Talk Pregame, and we hope that you will call in and join us during next week's show. Have a great weekend, everybody.